For example, when Uber first came to Taiwan, they work only with professionally licensed drivers. But very quickly, they introduced Uber X, which X, I think, stands for no professional driver license, maybe. And then it creates a tension in Taiwan. So we used a technology called Polis, which is an artificial intelligence tool, or as I prefer to call it, an assistive intelligence tool that clusters people according to their feelings about Uber X. And the feelings are there's no right or wrong about feelings, right? For 3 weeks, people just resonate with one another. And you can see one fellow citizen saying maybe that insurance for private vehicles is important for the passengers. And if you agree with me, you will move closer to me. If you disagree with me, you will move farther from me. And there's no reply button so there is no place for the troll to grow. And because of that, every time we had a police conversation, we just concluded one about our ocean proposals, we always see that, of course, there are some ideological differences. People have maybe 5 things that they fight about, but actually, most people agree with most other people on most of the things, most of the time. It's just if you look into a very antisocial social media, you will forget about this. They will make you
Minister,
forget about this.
but why is there no reply button? Can you explain us why you're so happy that there is no reply button on the screen?
And I'm also very happy that it participates pseudonymously. So this is definitely not your ordinary Habermas conversation deliberation, right? I think there's a very simple example here in the Uber case is that for people who are driving for Uber at the time, they're actually doing very questionably legal things. So if they are required to show up with their real name and or have a reply button where they can question and even interrogate essentially each other, very quickly you will get people who get pulled into those divisive statements like what is sharing economy? Is Uber even sharing economy? Is it sharing economy if you are not carpooling? And things like that, which is great from a debate point of view. But what we want is actually like design thinking, just to explore people's feelings. And so the facts and interpretations are what the traditional deliberations focus on. But what Polis does is that it adds a step called reflection of feelings between the facts and the interpretations. And when people can see that we are a polity after all, we have very similar feelings, for example, around registration, around insurance, and things like that, then people can then expand to the kind of face-to-face Habermas style deliberation that you just alluded to, and we live stream them too. What we're doing is essentially crowdsourced agenda setting that focus on the things that people have broad, rough consensus about, instead of the debate that leads to polarization and maybe find consensus, but most of the time just enmity. And so this is, I think, our contribution from the internet governance world was the idea of a rough consensus or harmony.
Let's talk a little bit about rough consensus. So unanimity, if I understand you correctly, can never be achieved, or is definitely not the goal in what you're doing. So, but what is the difference between rough consensus and the lowest common denominator? Why is rough consensus so good in your point of view? Why does it help us in order to develop policies?
Well, in online communities or in face-to-face committees, I mean, after COVID, it's the same thing anyway. In committees and communities, if you seek only find consensus, then people with the most time wins by default. Basically, on Facebook, for example, people who have more time to respond to each other's face instead of the book part will dominate the discussion simply by dwarfing out in terms of noise to signal ratio other people's points. But the Internet Engineering Task Force have long since figured out if we seek not the fine consensus, but rather something we can live with, something that we is more like consent, right? A common understanding that we hum to show that we can live with this, then it actually creates a more productive, significant inclusion into the special interest groups that will form to explore that possibility. In design thinking terms, if your exploration deviates, then you cannot actually do the define part and agree on a common understanding. So that is why a feeling checking part is always important, so you know what other people's arguments come from. And maybe while you seem very different in your positions, you actually share a very similar value and feeling. And we discover that kind of automatically using assistive intelligence on police, which is first used in Taiwan and now used also in a national platform called the Join, which has more than half of the population as visitors and deliberates very large policies far beyond what is originally the Taiwan purview, which is about digital economy.